Sesame Street, an American educational television show aimed at preschoolers, debuted on November 10, 1969 and quickly became the most popular children's show on television. The idea for the show started with a conversation between Lloyd Morissette and Joan Gans Cooney at a dinner party in 1966. Morissette mentioned that his 3-year-old daughter loved to sit in front of the TV every morning, but worried the programming for children was a wasteland of options, and wondered if there could be a way to make shows both educational and entertaining to younger viewers. Thus, Sesame Street was born. Many years since, the creators have used Sesame Street to address controversial and difficult topics like diversity and the spread of the HIV and AIDS virus. Despite some backlash over the years, the show's creators have continued to help young children process challenging topics, changing children's television forever. According to Joan Cooney, creator of Sesame Street, children's programming prior to her show consisted of
slapstick, cheap cartoons, a lot of kind of pie-in-your-face violence, and it was terrible. It was a disgrace. It was like Captain Kangaroo, though age-appropriate, had not become must-see TV. Bozo and Romper Room presented dumbed-down fun.
Lloyd Morissette's story sparked something in Joan Cooney, and she began to investigate how education could be packaged into entertaining children's shows. Cooney's opinion was that TV shows targeted towards children should prepare them not only for school but the real world as they grow up. Cooney, using her bachelor's degree in education and her study television and preschool education, started the Children's Television Workshop 2 years later in 1968 with an $8 million grant. Using $4 million, the first show funded was Sesame Street, which paired Cooney's ideas with Jim Henson's Muppets. Quickly, Sesame Street became a must-see children's show with over 74 million Americans watching. Sesame Street was started in the late 1960s, around the same time the civil rights movement was winding down. In the 1960s, things were beginning to seriously change for African Americans in the United States. They were beginning to sustain equal rights due to the influence of Martin Luther King Jr. and his I Have a Dream speech. This led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The conflict that existed within the civil rights movement is that there were many people in America who did not believe that everyone was equal. This started protests run by groups like the KKK, which started 100 years earlier. In the Freedom Summer of 1964, 3 young civil rights activists were working to register black voters in Mississippi. On their way back, they were pulled over by the sheriff, who was a member of the local Klan. The sheriff held them in custody, and he and other members of the Klan killed Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner because of their activism. All throughout America, African Americans were harassed, injured, and even killed. Sesame Street creators wanted to show young children that all people could live together in peace, to teach them that everyone is the same. This noble goal put Sesame Street in the middle of a civil rights conflict because many disagreed with integrated neighborhoods in society. Civil rights themes of diversity and inclusion were interwoven into the show as Sesame Street began to get more popular. The creators felt it would be beneficial to children if the Muppets began to talk about more than just numbers and shapes. Aaliyah Wong says the creators wanted to teach
children that it was okay to be different, that everyone struggles and develops in their own way.
Sesame Street began with an extremely diverse cast.
It's intentional from the beginning to show different races living together,
says David Kleeman, Executive Director of the American Center for Children in Media.
They were very conscious of the modeling that kids and parents would take away from that.
According to Lisa Guernsky,
in 1969, there was still a radical notion in some corners of the country. Here was a TV show putting African Americans on a level playing field with white characters, showing them not as servants or entertainers, but as equals.
I am black, brown, white, I speak a different language, but I must be respected, protected, never rejected. I am God's child. I am somebody. Give yourself a big hand.
The civil rights continued to impact Sesame Street in May 1970 as the State Commission for Educational Television in Mississippi banned the show. In the 1970s, Mississippi was still dealing with a large amount of discrimination. Many white children were taken out of public schools and put into private schools that only accepted white teens. Some families in Mississippi had an issue with the cast chosen for Sesame Street, and seeing the different ethnicities living together was deemed inappropriate and offensive. Mississippi's ban of Sesame Street reflected the fear of integrated neighborhoods beyond the Deep South in the 1960s.
Cities throughout the North and South, homeowners were panicked at the thought that black homeowners would leave their colored neighborhoods and move next door,
says journalist Jeff Nilsson.
The Myerses. I don't have any prejudice against colored. It's just that I wouldn't like to have one as a neighbor.
One of the commissioners in Mississippi stated that
some of the members of the commission were very much opposed to showing the series because it uses a highly integrated cast of children.
Despite the conflict surrounding the show's integrated cast, the ban was lifted 22 days later because the state commission received a surplus of letters from people in and outside of Mississippi that felt the ban was unreasonable.
Probably more conscientious parents who will put the education of their children ahead of their personal prejudices, and these people should not be denied a choice,
says one supporter of Sesame Street. Mississippi came to a compromise in order to make both Sesame Street supporters and non-supporters happy. Instead of taking the show away from all children, the state made a choice to let the parents choose whether or not their child watches the show. Sesame Street started tackling real-world issues from the start, trying to show kids that people with different skin colors shouldn't be treated different and that everyone should be equal. Sesame Street creators wanted to show kids that every single person is different and that should never affect the way you look at or act around a person. Sesame Street creators understood that children had the capacity to view others as equal and that they could carry these views into adulthood. Civil rights is one of the many controversial topics that Sesame Street has interwoven into its episodes. The AIDS and HIV disease had become a leading cause of death in many places around the world in the 1980s, and Sesame Street wanted to show kids that people with the disease were just like everyone else. At one point in time, in 35% of countries, half the people living with AIDS or HIV had reported being discriminated against or abused. Many people were discriminated against due to lack of knowledge on the disease because no one was really sure of how it was transmitted. People believed AIDS could be transmitted from person to person similar to the way someone would get the flu. Even today, fear-fueled myths of the 1980s still persist as some people believe AIDS can be transferred through saliva or skin-to-skin contact. In December 1984, 13-year-old Ryan White was diagnosed with AIDS soon after having a blood transfusion. He was given 3 to 6 months to live. White was taken out of school for a year and a half. He begged his mother to go back once he began to regain his strength. When his mother finally allowed him to visit school again, he was bullied and harassed by students who once called his friends.
It was really bad. It was, people were really cruel. People said he had to be gay, he had to done something bad or wrong, or he wouldn't have got it. Or God's punishment. We heard the God's punishment a lot, that somehow, some way he's done something he shouldn't have done or he wouldn't have got AIDS.
In 2002, the show introduced a 5-year-old Muppet to South Africa named Cammy. Cammy was HIV positive due to mother-child transmission, and she talks about her mother dying of AIDS, along with teaching children that people with AIDS and HIV are no different than anyone else.
I don't want to play.
Yini ungafuna ukudlala nathi namhlanje Kemi?
Because the other children at school don't want to play with me because I'm HIV positive. But mina ngidlale ngedwa. Ngoba? They say they don't want to touch me because they think I will make them sick.
Oh, but Kemi, we all know you can't get HIV just by touching someone or by being friends with them.
After airing this episode, the producers received a large amount of angry letters from critics in South Africa saying that
the show was promoting homosexuality and prematurely educating children on the disease,
says journalist Megan Colodges. This backlash caused such a conflict due to discrimination towards homosexuals and the belief that many Americans held that the disease was only transmitted through homosexual acts. Sesame Street was unafraid of these criticisms as Cammy was created to show people that just because someone has AIDS or HIV doesn't mean they can't live a normal life, and they should be treated just the same as everyone else. It was important to break the stigma and misinformation surrounding AIDS to children who will grow up in the days AIDS fear was monitoring. Gloria Britton, the project manager for Cammy, says,
"There are so many young children in South Africa who face the issues of being affected and infected by HIV and AIDS on a daily basis. We've got to help children to understand the real world that they live in."
Cammy was supposed to make her first appearance in the United States, but 5 representatives of the House of Commerce Committee insisted Cammy's story was not age-appropriate and should not be on PBS due to how mature the topic was. The creators felt it was so important to share Cammy with the world that they made a compromise just to air Cammy's episode in South Africa where people were most affected. Since the start of Sesame Street, more children's TV shows have not only been made to educate younger viewers, but have started to bring in controversial topics to the plot in order to appeal to all types of children and families. Many TV shows have developed since Sesame Street. Dora the Explorer and Go Diego Go have brought diversity into children's television by starring Hispanic characters, along with shows like Nickelodeon's The Loud House, featuring the first gay couple to appear on the network in the episode Overnight Success on June 6, 2016. Along with the episode named Ellis for Love, where the 15-year-old character Luna confesses a crush she has on a female character named Sam. Without Sesame Street's decision to incorporate difficult topics into their show, TV for kids may not be the way it is today. In the 49 years Sesame Street has been on television, it has educated children all over the world and prepared them for the academic and real-world challenges they will face in the future. Sesame Workshop has successfully produced not only the first educational children's TV show that talks about controversial topics, but a show that has been the most popular and loved children's television show accessible to all children.